In a world ruled by guns and ruthless men, the most dangerous secret wasn't a hidden vault. It was a silent girl. They mocked her weight. They ignored her silence. Until a struggling waitress broke all the rules, spoke her language, and accidentally stole the heart of a mafia king. The private dining room at L'Etoile, an ultra-exclusive establishment tucked away on Chicago's affluent Rush Street, was suffocatingly opulent. Heavy velvet curtains sealed out the piercing winds of the city, and the air was thick with the scent of roasted truffles, expensive cigars, and dangerous men. Harper Hayes stood quietly in the corner, a crisp white apron tied tight around her waist, her hands folded professionally behind her back. Her feet throbbed in her worn-out black shoes, a harsh reminder of the double shifts she had been pulling to keep her tiny apartment in Logan Square. She was tired, desperate for tips, and entirely invisible to the powerful figures sitting around the mahogany table. But Harper didn't mind being invisible. In a room full of the city's most feared syndicate leaders, invisibility was the safest place to be. At the head of the table sat Leo Moretti. Even seated, Leo commanded the room with a terrifying stillness. He possessed sharp, unforgiving features, dark hair slicked back, and eyes that held the cold, calculating glint of a man who decided who lived and who died before his morning espresso. He was the undisputed boss of the Chicago outfit. Surrounding him were his capos, men with broad shoulders and tailored suits, laughing loudly, clinking crystal glasses of rare scotch, and discussing port shipments and territory lines with brazen arrogance. But Harper's attention kept drifting to the only other woman in the room. Sitting at Leo's immediate right was his younger sister, Gemma. To the rest of the underworld, Gemma Moretti was a ghost, an unfortunate stain on the pristine, intimidating reputation of the Moretti family. She was heavily overweight, a fact the shallow, ruthless men in her brother's circle never let her forget through their microaggressions and veiled sneers. Dressed in a beautiful, albeit shapeless, dark emerald gown that seemed designed more to hide her body than flatter it, Gemma sat with her head bowed. More isolating than her weight, however, was her silence. Gemma was profoundly deaf. Harper watched as the evening unfolded. It was a masterclass in cruelty by omission. A waiter approached the table with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, offering them to the men who barked out their preferences. When the waiter reached Gemma, he hesitated, looked at Leo for translation or permission, and when Leo was momentarily distracted by a whispered comment from his underboss, the waiter simply bypassed her entirely. Gemma's hand had just begun to lift from her lap to point at a stuffed mushroom, but she slowly lowered it, her cheeks flushing a deep, embarrassed crimson. She retreated further into her oversized cashmere shawl. None of the men noticed. If they did, they didn't care. To them, she was just Leo's defective baggage. They spoke over her, laughed around her, and completely excluded her from the vibrant, albeit violent, energy of the dinner. Harper felt a familiar pang in her chest. She recognized that look of profound isolation. Harper's own mother had lost her hearing to an illness when Harper was a child, and Harper had spent her entire adolescence translating a world that refused to slow down for the deaf. Across the table, Victor Romano, a rival boss from the South Side with a reputation for sadism, was holding court. He was an older man with a cruel smile and a loud, grating voice. "Leo," Victor boomed, slicing into his prime rib. "You keep your circle tight. I respect that. But you gotta bring some life to these dinners. Look at your sister." Victor gestured toward Gemma with his fork. She's built for cut, sure, but she looks like she's attending a funeral. Does she even know what we're talking about? Or is it all just static in there? The table fell into a tense, suffocating hush. The capos shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Mocking the boss's sister was a death wish, but Victor was testing the waters, probing for weakness. Gemma, highly adept at reading lips and sensing the shift in the room's energy, shrank under Victor's gaze. She didn't catch every word, but she caught the word comfort, saw the sneer on his lips, and understood the derogatory intent. She looked down at her plate, tears threatening to spill over her thick, dark eyelashes. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. Leo's eyes darkened to a terrifying pitch black. He set his silver knife down on the porcelain plate. The small clink sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "My sister," Leo said, his voice a low, lethal purr that made the hairs on Harper's arms stand up, "is exactly where she belongs. I'd advise you to focus on the shipment contracts, Victor, unless you'd like your jaw wired shut so you can experience a bit of her silence yourself." Victor held his hands up in mock surrender, a greasy smile plastered on his face. "Just a joke, Leo. Relax, pass the wine." Leo defended her. Yes, but Harper noticed what he didn't do. He didn't look at Gemma. He didn't reach out to comfort her. He didn't translate what had just happened to assure her she was safe. He was so consumed by the pride and politics of his mafia empire that he was completely blind to the agonizing loneliness of the girl sitting right next to him. Leo loved his sister fiercely, but he treated her like a fragile porcelain doll to be guarded, not a human being who desperately needed a friend. Harper wiped her hands on her apron, her heart hammering against her ribs. The restaurant's strict policy was clear: speak only when spoken to. Never interrupt the VIPs. But watching the silent tears pool in Gemma's eyes, Harper made a choice that would permanently alter the trajectory of her life. The main courses were cleared, and the heavy atmosphere in the room shifted to business. Blue smoke from expensive Cuban cigars began to snake toward the crystal chandeliers. Harper was tasked with taking the dessert and after-dinner drink orders. She moved methodically around the table, taking orders from the men who barely registered her existence. Double espresso, Glenfiddich, neat, cannoli. When Harper finally reached the head of the table, she stood between Leo and Gemma. Leo was deep in a tense negotiation with Victor over a union dispute on the docks. "I need 50% of the inbound crates," Victor demanded, leaning forward. "You'll get 30, and you'll thank me for it," Leo countered coldly, not looking up as Harper approached. "Bring me a black coffee." Harper nodded, noting it on her pad. She then turned her body entirely toward Gemma. The young woman was staring blankly at the white tablecloth, entirely detached from the high-stakes extortion happening inches from her face. Harper took a deep breath. She didn't speak. Instead, she raised her hands and let her fingers dance in fluid, perfect American Sign Language. "Hello," Harper signed, making sure her movements were within Gemma's line of sight. "My name is Harper. Would you like some dessert? The chocolate lava cake is amazing, but we also have a really good strawberry tart." Gemma gasped. It was a sharp, audible intake of breath that instantly drew the eyes of a few men sitting nearby. Her head snapped up, her dark eyes wide with utter shock. She stared at Harper's hands, then up at Harper's face, searching for a joke, a trick, some cruel punchline. But Harper just offered her a warm, genuine smile. Gemma's hands trembled as she lifted them. She was so out of practice communicating with anyone outside her private tutors that her fingers felt stiff. You know sign language, Gemma signed back, her movements small, hesitant, close to her chest. Yes, Harper replied seamlessly, her hands moving with a comforting grace. My mother was deaf. I've been signing since I was a little girl. You look really bored. I don't blame you. These guys talk too much. A loud, unexpected sound erupted from Gemma. It was a laugh, a bright, joyous, uninhibited laugh that cut through the cigar smoke and the mafia tension like a ray of sunlight piercing a dark storm. The entire table froze. The low hum of negotiation died instantly. Victor stopped mid-sentence. The capos reached instinctively toward the inside of their suit jackets, startled by the sudden noise. Leo Moretti's head snapped toward his sister. He hadn't heard Gemma laugh like that in over a decade. His eyes darted from his beaming sister to the waitress in the cheap uniform standing beside her. I would love the chocolate cake, Gemma signed rapidly, her face illuminated from the inside out, completely transforming her features. And a hot chocolate, please. Coming right up, Gemma, Harper signed, giving her a quick wink. What the hell is going on here? Leo demanded, his voice slicing through the silence. His dark eyes were fixed on Harper, analyzing her with predatory intensity. What did you do to her? Harper swallowed hard, suddenly intensely aware of the danger she was in. She dropped her hands and clasped them behind her back, reverting to the obedient server. I just asked her what she wanted for dessert, sir. You waved your hands at her, Victor sneered from across the table, looking at Harper with disgust. The girl's deaf, not a circus act. Get out of here and bring the coffee. Before Harper could move, Gemma suddenly slammed her hand down on the table. The heavy thud rattled the silverware. She glared fiercely at Victor, then turned to her brother and began signing frantically. Leo stared at his sister, helpless. Gemma, calm down. I don't know what you're saying. He looked up at one of his guards. Where is her interpreter? I told you to have him on standby in the lobby. He went home sick an hour ago, boss, the guard stammered, sweating bullets under Leo's deadly gaze. Gemma crossed her arms over her chest, huffing in frustration, tears of anger prickling her eyes again as she looked at her brother's inability to understand her. She felt like a prisoner in a glass box. Harper couldn't stop herself. She's saying, Harper spoke up, her voice surprisingly steady despite the rapid beating of her heart, that the man across the table is a pig, and if he calls her a circus act again, she wants you to throw him out. The silence that followed was absolute. Victor's face turned a violent shade of purple. He stood up slowly, a menacing bulk of a man. What did you just say to me, you little bitch? Half a dozen guns were drawn in a millisecond. The metallic shuck of safeties being clicked off echoed in the dining room. Harper froze, the blood draining from her face as she looked at the barrels of the weapons. She had just insulted a cartel boss. Leo didn't draw a weapon. He didn't even stand up. He simply raised one finger. Instantly, his capos trained their guns directly on Victor and his crew. Sit down, Victor, Leo said softly. She insulted me, Leo, a damn waitstaff, Victor roared, though he didn't reach for his gun. She translated for my sister, Leo corrected, his eyes never leaving Harper's terrified face. And in this family, my sister's word is absolute. He paused, letting the threat hang in the air. Sit down. Victor gritted his teeth, visibly weighing the odds of surviving a shootout in the Moretti stronghold. Slowly, he sank back into his chair. Leo turned his full, paralyzing attention back to Harper. "You understand her?" "Yes, sir," Harper whispered. "I speak ASL." Leo looked at Gemma. Gemma was looking at Harper like she was a lifeline thrown into a drowning sea. The heavy, depressed posture she had carried all evening was gone. She was sitting up straight, looking at her brother and pointing directly at Harper. "She stays," Gemma mouthed the words as she signed them, making sure Leo understood the demand. Leo ran a hand over his jaw, calculating. He looked at Harper's worn-out shoes, the dark circles under her eyes, and the defiant tilt of her chin. "What is your name?" Leo asked. "Harper. Harper Hayes." "Well, Harper Hayes," Leo said, his tone leaving absolutely no room for debate. "You just served your last table. You work for me now." The transition from a cramped, drafty apartment in Logan Square to the sprawling Moretti estate on Chicago's ultra-wealthy Gold Coast was nothing short of whiplash. Harper Hayes found herself standing in a bedroom larger than her entire previous living space, surrounded by mahogany furniture, silk draperies, and a sweeping view of Lake Michigan. She had been hired as a companion, a translator, and a confidant, but as the heavy oak doors of the mansion clicked shut behind her, she realized she had also just stepped into a beautifully gilded cage. Her first few weeks were a delicate dance on shattered glass. The Moretti compound was a fortress disguised as a palace, buzzing with heavily armed men in tailored suits, silent maids who kept their eyes glued to the marble floors, and the constant, underlying hum of organized crime. Harper navigated the sweeping staircases and shadowy corridors with her heart permanently lodged in her throat. But then there was Gemma. Away from the sneering faces of her brother's capos, Gemma Moretti was an absolute revelation. Without the oppressive weight of the syndicate's judgment pressing down on her, the young woman blossomed. Harper quickly discovered that Gemma possessed a wickedly sharp sense of humor, an almost terrifying intellect, and a profound, observant nature, born from a lifetime of watching a world that refused to speak to her. Because people assumed Gemma was unaware of her surroundings, they spoke freely in front of her. Gemma, an expert at reading lips and micro-expressions, knew every secret, every betrayal, and every hidden agenda within the Chicago outfit. Their days were spent in the sprawling library or the sun-drenched conservatory, hands flying in rapid American Sign Language. They talked about everything: art, history, the ridiculous fashion choices of the guards, and eventually, the painful realities of their lives. One rainy afternoon, while sharing a massive plate of decadent pastries from a private chef, Harper gently broached the subject of the dinner at L'Etoile. "Why do you let them treat you like that?" Harper signed, her expression soft, devoid of pity but full of genuine curiosity. "You are smarter than every single man in that room combined. Why do you let them make you feel small?" Gemma paused, a half-eaten chocolate eclair in her hand. She looked out the rain-streaked window for a long time before setting the pastry down. Her hands rose slowly, her signs precise and heavy, with an emotional burden she had carried for years. "You think I don't know what I look like, Harper," Gemma signed, gesturing to her heavily overweight frame. "I know they think I am fat. I know they think I am broken. But this body, this weight, it is my armor." Harper frowned, tilting her head. "Armor?" "Yes," Gemma continued, her dark eyes flashing with a fierce, quiet intelligence. In my brother's world, women are currency. They are traded to forge alliances, married off to rival bosses to keep the peace. If I were thin, beautiful, and perfect, Leo would be pressured to marry me off to a monster like Victor Romano. But because I am fat, because I am deaf, they see me as defective merchandise. No one wants to marry the broken, fat sister. By being this way, I stay safe. I stay with Leo. It is a lonely fortress, but it is mine. Harper stared at her, completely stunned by the heartbreaking brilliance of the strategy. Gemma hadn't let herself go. She had deliberately built a physical wall to protect herself from the ruthless political machinery of the Mafia. Harper reached across the table and took Gemma's hand, giving it a fierce, reassuring squeeze. From that moment, the bond between the two women forged into unbreakable steel. While Harper was discovering the true Gemma, Leo Moretti was discovering Harper. Leo was a man who thrived on control, fear, and absolute authority. He was not used to anyone looking him directly in the eye, let alone a former waitress with a sharp tongue and zero regard for his terrifying reputation. But Harper didn't flinch when he entered a room. She didn't lower her gaze. When Leo's demands regarding Gemma's schedule were unreasonable, Harper pushed back, signing rapidly to Gemma, and then translating her own defiance with a calm, unwavering voice. One evening, late in the night, Harper was in the library, searching for a specific book on Italian Renaissance art for Gemma. She was standing on her tiptoes on a rolling ladder when the heavy mahogany doors creaked open. Leo walked in, looking exhausted. He had shed his suit jacket, his tie was undone, and a faint smear of what looked distressingly like blood stained the cuff of his crisp white shirt. He stopped when he saw her. The air in the room instantly grew thick, charged with an undeniable, heavy tension. "You're up late," Leo noted, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that sent a completely involuntary shiver down Harper's spine. He walked slowly towards the bookshelf, moving with the lethal grace of an apex predator. "Gemma wanted to read about Botticelli," Harper replied, her fingers gripping the wooden rungs of the ladder, tighter as he approached. "She has trouble sleeping when it storms." Leo stopped right at the base of the ladder, forcing Harper to look down at him. Up close, the dangerous magnetism of the Mafia King was overwhelming. His dark eyes locked onto hers, analyzing, searching, stripping away her defenses without saying a single word. "She laughed today," Leo said quietly, the harshness in his voice completely absent, replaced by a raw vulnerability that shocked Harper. "I was in the hallway. I heard her laughing in the conservatory. I haven't heard that sound since our mother died." Harper softened, stepping down one rung to be closer to eye level. "She has a beautiful laugh. She just needed someone willing to listen to it." Leo's gaze dropped to her lips for a fraction of a second before meeting her eyes again. The intensity in his stare was scorching. "You are a very dangerous woman, Harper Hayes. You walked into my world, insulted a rival boss, took over my sister's life, and now you stand in my house completely unafraid of me." "Should I be afraid of you?" Harper whispered, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs. Leo reached out, his large, calloused hand gently brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His touch was shockingly tender for a man capable of such extreme violence. "Everyone else is," he murmured. "But no, you should never be afraid of me. I protect what belongs to me." He stepped back, the mask of the ruthless crime boss snapping back into place, and walked out of the library, leaving Harper trembling, her breath caught in her throat, entirely consumed by the terrifying realization that she was falling in love with a monster. The fragile piece of the Gold Coast estate shattered on a crisp Tuesday afternoon. Gemma had insisted on leaving the compound. She had been invited to a highly exclusive, private viewing at a luxury boutique situated just a block away from the Drake Hotel on Michigan Avenue. For the first time in years, she wanted a new dress, not a shapeless gown to hide her body, but something beautiful. Harper had encouraged her, thrilled by this sudden spark of confidence. Leo had reluctantly agreed, sending them in a bulletproof SUV flanked by 2 heavily armed guards. For an hour, the boutique was a haven of silk, lace, and laughter. Gemma stood before the 3-way mirror in a stunning, deep crimson wrap dress that accentuated her curves, her face glowing with genuine joy. Harper stood beside her, signing her enthusiastic approval. "You look like a queen," Harper signed, grinning widely. Gemma beamed, twirling slightly. "I feel like one." The world outside the boutique exploded. It happened with terrifying suddenness. The heavy glass windows of the storefront shattered inward under a hail of automatic gunfire. The mannequins were shredded, luxury handbags blown apart like confetti. Gemma didn't hear the deafening roar of the machine guns. She didn't hear the screams of the boutique staff. But she felt the violent, aggressive vibration of the floorboards beneath her feet. She saw the glass explode. She saw one of the Moretti guards collapse onto the plush carpet, a dark pool of crimson expanding rapidly across his chest. Panic seized Gemma's throat, freezing her in place in front of the mirror. Harper didn't hesitate. Survival instinct, honed by years of scraping by on the streets, took over completely. She lunged across the dressing room, tackling Gemma to the floor, just as a line of bullets tore through the drywall where they had been standing seconds before. The weight of Gemma's body pinned Harper to the floor, shielding her, but Harper wrapped her arms fiercely around the younger woman, pressing Gemma's head down. "Stay down! Stay down!" Harper screamed, though she knew Gemma couldn't hear her. She tapped frantically on Gemma's shoulder, a prearranged signal they had jokingly made up for emergency. Outside the dressing room, the remaining Moretti guard was returning fire. But he was pinned down. Men were shouting. The metallic clatter of shell casings hitting the floor was a terrifying soundtrack to the chaos. Victor Romano's men had found them. Victor, nursing his bruised ego from the dinner at L'Etoile, had decided to strike at Leo's only vulnerability. Suddenly, a searing, white-hot pain ripped through Harper's torso and upper arm. She gasped, a cry of pure agony escaping her lips as a stray bullet grazed her bicep, tearing through her blouse. Blood instantly soaked the fabric, hot and sticky. Gemma saw the blood. Her eyes widened in absolute terror, and she let out a guttural, heartbroken cry, reaching for Harper's arm, trying desperately to apply pressure with her trembling hands. I'm okay," Harper managed to sign with her good hand, gritting her teeth against the blinding pain. "Stay flat." Just as footsteps crunched on the broken glass, approaching their dressing room, the distinct, terrifying roar of a high-powered engine screeched to a halt outside. Then came the voice. It was a sound so dark, so saturated in pure, unadulterated fury. It seemed to shake the very foundation of the building. "Kill every single one of them!" Leo's voice thundered over the gunfire. The ensuing firefight was brief, brutally efficient, and entirely one-sided. Leo had arrived with his elite strike team. The staccato rhythm of the gunfire shifted, and within 90 seconds, the boutique fell into a heavy, ringing silence, punctuated only by the groans of dying men. "Gemma! Harper!" Leo bellowed, his voice raw with panic. "Here!" Harper choked out, her voice weak from the shock and the pain. Leo tore the dressing room curtain off its rod. He stood there, a terrifying vision of vengeance. His bespoke suit was ruined. He held a smoking Sig Sauer in his right hand, and his eyes were wild. When he saw his sister weeping over Harper and the blood pooling on the carpet, something inside the Mafia King completely shattered. He dropped the gun. He fell to his knees, pulling Gemma into his chest with one arm, pressing a frantic, fierce kiss to her forehead. "Are you hit? Gemma, are you hurt?" Gemma shook her head, sobbing, pointing desperately at Harper. Leo turned his fierce gaze to Harper. He saw her pale face, the blood soaking her sleeve, and the sheer terror in her eyes. He scooped Harper up in his arms with terrifying ease, holding her against his chest as if she weighed absolutely nothing. "You're going to be okay. I've got you," Leo commanded, his voice trembling slightly, a sound no one in the Chicago outfit had ever heard. Hours later, the adrenaline had faded, replaced by a heavy, somber quiet in the Gold Coast estate. A private syndicate doctor had stitched Harper's arm, pumped her full of painkillers, and ordered strict bed rest. She was lying in the massive bed in her room, staring at the ceiling, feeling the dull, rhythmic throb in her shoulder. The door clicked open, and Leo walked in. He had showered, washing away the blood and the gunpowder, but the dark, predatory energy still clung to him. He pulled a chair up to the side of her bed and sat down heavily. "Gemma is asleep," Leo said softly. "She refused to leave your door until I promised her you would survive the night." "I'm fine, Leo. It's just a graze," Harper murmured, turning her head to look at him. Leo leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped tightly together. "Victor Romano is dead. His entire crew is gone. No one will ever threaten my family again." He looked up, his dark eyes locking onto hers with a burning, intense heat. "And you, Harper Hayes, are my family now." Harper's breath hitched. "Leo?" "You took a bullet for my sister," Leo interrupted, his voice dropping to a gravelly, intimate whisper. "You saw past the weight, you saw past the silence, and you gave her a voice. You gave her her life back, and in doing so..." He reached out, his large, warm hand gently covering her uninjured one, his thumb tracing the knuckles. "You brought me back to life, too." Harper stared at him, seeing past the ruthless mob boss, past the violence and the fear, to the fiercely loyal, deeply broken man beneath. She didn't pull her hand away. Instead, she turned her palm up, lacing her fingers through his. Leo leaned in, the distance between them vanishing entirely. His lips brushed against hers, a touch so incredibly gentle it felt like a prayer. It was a promise of protection, of devotion, and of a love forged in the fires of an unforgiving world. In a world ruled by guns and ruthless men, the silent girl had found her voice, and the poor waitress had captured the heart of the king, proving that the most powerful weapon of all wasn't fear. It was the courage to finally be seen. Did Harper's bravery and Gemma's hidden strength leave you entirely breathless? In a dark world, of ruthless mobsters. True power is found in the voices we give to the silenced. If you loved this thrilling mafia romance, hit that like button and share this dramatic story with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heart-pounding tales of forbidden love, dangerous secrets, and unexpected heroes. Drop a comment below on what you think Leo will do next.